like it's really weird to call you by your first name, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going
to. Okay, that's most people just call me Plummer.
That works. We're just going to go with Plummer. I'm really grateful for you taking the time out to be here today. As I tried to allude to in your quick line, you wear so many hats, and it's really cool to interesting how our lives would have connected eventually, which is kind of weird, whether through Rutgers or through family, friends, and things like that. And so I want to, let you introduce yourself. And I feel like you have so much aspects of your life that are so, I think, pertinent and relatable to the work that I personally hope to do through Powerhouse and a lot of the areas of advocacy and the populations that I care about. So I hope that we can get to highlight a lot of that stuff today. So so first, introduce yourself to the people so they know who you are, where you're from, and how you identify in terms of like your fine arts, but also your career.
Sure. So my name is Joel Plummer, and I do a lot of things, but it all comes down to me being a teacher. So I teach in a classroom for more than 23 years now. I've taught African-American, U.S., and Latino history at the high school level for 14 years. I've taught in the Africana Studies Department at Rutgers. My specialty there is African-Americans in sports. And I'm also a working member of the media. I'm a photojournalist. So I do camera work. And on top of that, I also write. But all of those things are tools for me to teach. So my art, my writing, my instruction in the classroom is all centered around me being a teacher. And so when we get into it, but later I'll go deeper into that. But how I view the world and how I operate in the world, I'm always thinking, how can I use this to teach someone something?
Okay, that's amazing. So that philosophy, I guess, in your orientation in approaching what you do within your other skill sets and passions are really just rooted in your desire to educate the next generation and have them be more well-informed in various ways. I did not get to take your class at Rutgers, which for a multiple of reasons, I feel like I didn't know about it until late. And then like I had to, by the time it used to get full so fast and it would be like, okay, this is impossible to get into. And then having internships my senior year, it just didn't seem to work out. But like, I think 80% of my friends took your class. And so I kind of vicariously got information and the lessons and the nuggets you would drop. But can you talk a little bit about how you have formalized your, I guess, your educational perspective in terms of mentoring and really imparting knowledge on generations so that they're more informed about the issues that you are most passionate about specifically?
Yeah, well, you know, my teaching is kind of selfish in that I always explain to people the reason why I became a teacher is because I had no intentions of going into education at all. Even though both of my parents were educators. My mother was a kindergarten teacher and preschool teacher for 30 plus years. My father was a dean at Rutgers. Wow. So I literally grew up on the campus, but I had no interest in education whatsoever. But it was in my sophomore year of high school. I was in between my sophomore and junior years in high school. I was in the second year of a summer program for, it sounds so elitist now, but talented and gifted and talented Black and Latino high school students. But we stayed at William Patterson College. The program was called the W.E.B. Du Bois Scholars Institute. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they made us do, that it was a two summer program, and that second summer, they made us teach algebra to middle school students from Newark. And I despise math. I have no use for math whatsoever. Like I hate it I hate everything about it. And I had no particular interest in kids, but that was part of the program. So I had a student, I believe her name was Zakia. So this is the summer of 1993, 92. And so I was teaching her how to do what had to have been a basic algebra problem, because anything
it wasn't advanced for you.
Yeah, if I could understand it, it couldn't have been that complicated. So like, you know, basic solve for X type thing, right? So that's one day I'm teaching her how to do it. Then the next day she comes and I see that she's struggling with a problem, and she's sitting next to me, and I reach over to help, and she's like, "No, I got it. You taught me this yesterday." And then she figured it out. And that right there, I had the greatest feeling in the world. I was like, oh wait, I'm responsible for her being able to do something. Like, I made that happen. And it felt amazing. And I was like, and this is a subject I hate. So imagine if I was actually teaching my passion, which was, even as a high school student, was African American history. And so when I'm teaching and mentoring and getting involved, I'm always chasing that high I felt the first time a student learned something because of me. And so, yes, I enjoy people, you know, being upwardly mobile and doing great things with their lives. But part of it is the selfish, you know, high that I'm chasing that comes from being the person that imparts knowledge into someone. And the second part, which is also selfish, and I always tell my students this on the last day of class, is that I have children. And the reason why I invest my time into other people is that I have the expectation that my students are going to make the world a better place for my kids, as cliche as that sounds. But that's what I charge them with, the responsibility of making life easier for my children. And it's my children's responsibility to make it easier for their children.
Right.
So it's a selfish thing that also benefits society.
Right? Come on, Plummer for president. But like, so one thing I love about what I've now realized about your story is the embedded love for educational pursuit that came from your parents' career, whether it was pursuing within education or just the value of seeing how learning can impact and change how people just view themselves and how they walk around in the world. Can you talk a little bit about how since this is like the fine arts focus, the photo journaling, I think, is something that was unique for me. I don't think I had a perspective of storytelling from the way that you've done it in some of your illustrations and things like that. And so can you talk about how you've used that as a way to also do that educational piece?
So what happened there was, honestly, I didn't pick up a camera seriously until about 2007-ish. And the reason I did it was twofold. One, I was trying to write, and I realized it's incredibly hard to get people to read nonfiction. Like, it's a struggle to get people to pick up a book. And I was like, all right, if I can't get them to read, maybe I can get them to look at a photo. And I also read somewhere that doing art was good for your so-called academic and so-called
stuff.
Yeah, the other side of your brain, your right side of brain stuff. So I was like, all right, let me get into art, because I can't draw, I can't sing, but I want to do something creative. So I picked up a camera, and little by little, it turns out I have somewhat of an addictive personality. When I get into something,
you go deep.
Yeah, and I became obsessed with every ounce of it. So my wife bought me a camera for my birthday in like 2007 or 2008. And just a little camera, but then I just became obsessed with it. And I would spend, no lie, probably easily 40 hours a week, either taking photos, reading about photography, or watching videos about photography. It became a full-time second job, this obsession of learning this craft.
Right.
And eventually I mastered it, right? It's something that I have a friend that was a motivational speaker, but he was talking about Diddy, and he was talking about that at one point Diddy was doing like 60 hours a week when he was young, and his point was anybody that does that much, puts that much effort into anything, you're going to be a success. There's no way you put that type of hours into something and you don't learn.
Right.
Yeah. And so that ended up being my attitude with photography. And so, but what I realized subconsciously, I didn't do it on purpose, it just works out, that I think part of the reason I gravitated towards photography is because it's writing history. It's still writing history, but it's doing it in the present instead of doing it with a pen. And one of my taglines is that I write history with a camera. And so that's why photojournalism speaks to me. I know that I'm capturing history that will be viewed at a later point.
Okay.
And when I'm taking photos, and this goes back to teaching, when I'm taking photos, I'm always thinking, the reason what attracts me to certain things, because I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a great thing to talk about later on. I want to capture this so I can talk about this in a classroom somewhere. So every time I'm taking pictures of something, I'm already thinking the end result of this is not necessarily that someone's going to be looking at it online or in a book somewhere. It's that I'm going to be talking about this in a classroom.
In the classroom, right?
And that kind of shapes what I choose to look at and what I find interesting in a photo.
So we discovered you because through you, I discovered you can actually share your screen through Instagram Live. Do you see the button? Then I can try to, because maybe we can look at a couple of the images and you can give.
It looks like I don't have that option.
Okay, so let me try to. So I think I press the little add button and then let's see. I tell you, this is like advanced. Okay, nope, that wasn't it. So they made it look so easy on the videos.
I know, right?
And then you're like, I don't see those same. Do people only have certain rights to this? It shouldn't.
Sure.
Okay, we'll talk about the next question just as I still try to figure it out. So I guess.
Actually, you know what I might be able to do? If I grab this book here.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I can show stuff.
Requests. Nope. I can do everything else. I can share this. I can comment. I can answer questions. Yeah, it's definitely not as easy as they made it seem.
I believe it.
I'm wondering if I have to do it from a desktop and not my phone.
Oh, you never know. That could be it.
Okay. So you have the printout?
Yeah, it was. So I interrupted you. You were, it sounded like you were setting up a question though.
No, but I'm saying part of it was me delaying the tactics to try to figure out to bring it up. But if you want to give an example of that perspective that you take and why you chose a specific image or. Okay. Yeah.
So let's see. I don't know if everything is this backwards though. It's a mirror.
It does. It is backwards, but.
Well, this is my favorite photo, right? Because I think this is from a 2014 anti-police brutality protest. And I love this photo because I feel like it's the whole thing in one shot, right? What's the issue? Well, stop killing us. Right. And I was for 2 years, I followed the Black Lives Matter anti-police movement, anti-police brutality movement. And I covered events, protests from New York down to DC. And again, when I take a picture like this, I'm thinking, like, how can I tell the story of a day in one shot, and the intensity of the day, which is why I like this woman here with her sign. And I like it because it also reveals the frustration, right? Black people are just saying, not even that we want equal rights, not even that we want a handout, but literally just asking to live.
Right.
And I love that photo symbolizes the frustration over that. And one of the things that art does, and this is something, you know what, I didn't talk about how my journey to art, and how it's connected to my academic schooling. So I went to Rutgers Newark as an undergrad, and that's also where I got my master's from. And my mentor there was the late, great Clement Alexander Price. He was the huge historian up there. African-American history was his specialty. He was like the preeminent historian on African-Americans in New Jersey. Absolute legend. When I graduated as an undergrad, and I was at Newark, it's not called Africana Studies, it's called African and African-American Studies, but still the same thing, 014. I graduated as the top student in the major, and when I graduated in 97. And Dr. Price, there was a ceremony and stuff, and Dr. Price gave me a book about art. And I didn't care anything about art at the time. And I looked at the book, and you can tell I was unimpressed with the book.
He's like, okay.
Yeah. But he said to me, he was like, don't worry about it. When you get older, you'll have an appreciation for art. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, fast forward now to, 10 years later, exactly 10 years later, right, art became my obsession, because I understood the power of art. Now as a grown-up, because when you graduate as an undergrad from as college, you're not really a grown-up.
You're not really a grown-up. It's like a fake grown-up.
Yeah. Yeah. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Now I get the power of art. And there's this brain researcher. I think his name is I forgot his name. It might be George Lakoff. But what he says about art, he says that studies have shown that art is kind of like a virtual reality simulator, and that if you look at a picture of a sunset, it evokes the same feelings and same mental and biological responses that looking at it in real life would do.
Wow. Okay.
So you get to virtually experience things that you can't actually do.
Yeah.
So if you wonder so when you look at a protest, or if you look at those old videos of civil rights protests and you see people getting beat up and bit by German shepherds and knocked down with fire hoses, why does that hit you? Well, because your brain is simulating you being in that situation.
Right. And
so art allows you to be places where you can't be. And wrong book. This is all about protests. That's why I got into sports. That's part of the reason why I love sports photography. That's the other thing I do. Is that the reason why good sports photography works is because it makes people feel like they are at the event.
Right.
Actually, good sports photography makes you feel like you're a part of the event. So when I'm shooting boxing, for instance, if I do it right, when I take a picture of the impact of someone getting hit by a punch, you feel like the person getting hit.
Yeah, I think I've cringed. Like, I'm like, oh, what?
Right. And that's because your brain is like, oh, it's your brain makes you feel like, oh, I'm in this thing.
Right.
And that's the power of art to move people. And it's no accident that if you look at all giant social movements, there's always a soundtrack that goes along with it. There's a music that goes along with it. There's visual art that goes along with it, because it moves people from one place to another.
Right.
And I've fallen in love with the power of art.
Of being able to speak those things, or allow people to engage with the feelings that encompass that area. So I love that your work not only serves as entertainment and just allowing people to visualize. I love the the sports pictures and everything like that. And then you also have that area of advocacy, and trying to bring awareness and social consciousness around various issues, particularly as they pertain to the Black and Latino community.
Absolutely.
And then I guess what I would love for people to hear, as you, because you've talked about these spans of time where it's almost like you became a different version of you, and
Yeah.
that matured sense of self. One of the big things that I personally love doing as an advisor is really helping my students start to discover who they are, and that self-actualization is not like this destination, but it's this continuous process as you realize things align with your values. Can you talk a little bit about how both your education, your photo journaling, and your writing have really begin to, I guess, structure I guess you talked about how they've come out of your value system,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess more like how it's continued to just form it more and more as the older that you get, and then how you're feeding that into, you hope to feed that into future generations to inspire them to do the same.
Yeah. So what I realize now that I didn't understand when I was younger is that life is pretty long. And I set goals for myself when I was a young person, and especially education. So that was my focus. All right, I'm going to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be that teacher that that everyone talked about, right? That everyone was like, oh, that's a great teacher. That person changed my life. They helped me do such and such. And I realized I did that,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm 23 years into doing it, and I did that. And I realized, okay, wait a minute, there's nothing left to accomplish here.
Right.
Like, I can get more kids into college. That's fine. But I've done that before. I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a new achievement.
Level. Right.
Yeah, mentoring kids, bonding with kids. Like, I love all that. But it's like, yeah, I've done this before. I've already won the championship. All right, I've won 10 championships. And it never occurred to me that I was going to get there, right, with a whole bunch of life left on the other end. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, this isn't hard anymore. Like, I know I can walk into a classroom, any classroom, and I know what jokes are going to land and which ones aren't. I already know what lessons are going to really get people moving and which ones I just have to kind of suffer through. Like,
Right.
there's no surprises. Like, this is, and so I was like, I began to realize, like, what happens is you eventually, it's kind of like a what's that animal? I guess it's like a hermit crab,
Mm-hmm.
right? You eventually outgrow your shell.
Yeah. Okay.
You outgrow your shell, and then you have to do something. You have to do something new.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that period in between, though. There's this danger period where the hermit crab has to get out the shell and completely exposed while it's trying to find the new shell.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of bad things can happen, right? That's when prey can come down and eat you up, and you're exposed, and that's that transition period, and that's the frustration I think that people feel when they know that I've done this thing, but it's time for me to move on, but I'm still trying to find what it is.
Right.
And that's a painful, scary place to be until you find your thing. And so that's how I ended up teaching college. I was like, all right, I've done this high school thing. I feel like this is too small for me. So then I got an opportunity to teach at the college level. And I jumped into that. And for me, that was really life-saving psychologically, because I was really feeling uninspired at the high school level, not because my kids weren't great. They were fine. It was just that nothing was new. Nothing was a challenge.
It was becoming monotonous and like,
yeah.
And
so then I jumped into this college thing, and that rejuvenated me. That recharged my battery in both places. But now I'm 14 years into teaching college.
You're like, okay.
And it's like, all right, what else can I do? And so this art thing came along at the perfect time, because I just started seeing how can I reach people in different ways. And the other thing I've learned along the way that I didn't have appreciation for when I was young was just how intellectually challenging the arts are. Because I'm trying to push my mind. And now that I've realized it, and I wrote about this in my last book on education, too often we try to steer children away from art.
Yeah.
We want them to do safe
Science,
jobs.
state, STEM, like
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's one of the greatest tragedies in education, because what we do in America is that we pretty much say real learning is math, English, science.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real stuff, right? There's the hard sciences,
right? And
right? That's
soft ones.
Yeah, and soft sciences, and really everything outside of the hard sciences and math is all fluff.
Mm-hmm.
Various degrees of fluff, and art being at the far end of what is considered intellectually challenging.
Right.
But I argue that the opposite is true. That there's nothing harder, there's nothing more intellectually challenging than creation.
Mm.
Making something, that bringing something into the material world that didn't exist. That's why the highest levels of education, if you get a PhD, what do you have to do? You have to create an original book of knowledge, something that never existed. You have to create something that never existed before.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, people call you a master intellect.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what artists do all the time. Okay. And I always say all the time, right? And I would say artists always engage in the godlike, or little g, godlike process of taking something that doesn't exist anywhere except in their mind.
Right.
And then they slowly somehow work it into the material world.
Yeah.
That people can see. It's like magic.
Now they can experience and taste it and feel it. And
yeah. Exactly. But it didn't exist physically. And you
Mm-hmm.
just brought it out of you. You took it out of your brain and then made this sculpture, made this painting, made this song that didn't exist anywhere in reality except your mind.
Right.
And now we can all see it, we can all hear it, we can all feel it. You're constantly creating. You're not just copying someone else's mathematical formula and figuring out how to do something new with it. You're creating something, and you have to do it all of the time.
All the time, continually doing it.
Yeah, so your brain is working overtime when you do it. And that's what Albert Einstein said. Albert Einstein, and I'm butchering his quote, but he basically said, the most powerful form of intellect is imagination. Because you're literally creating stuff that hasn't been seen yet, hasn't been done yet.
Right.
And you can't even invent anything without an imagination.
Without imagining. 100%.
Right.
And innovation, they've tried to put a new word on it. Like innovation, like, all it is imagination propelled, right?
And this is why it's tragic that the first thing that gets cut in schools when there's budget is art.
It's art, yeah.
And look, I work in a school district where elementary school kids get one period. My daughter would get one period of art, visual art, a week. Mm-hmm. She'd get like 40 minutes of art a week. And then the rest of the time, you get one art period, you get one music period, you get one, and they don't even call them subjects, they call them specials.
Yeah, specials, and it gets rotated within the week. So it's like day one. Yeah, uh-huh.
And they're basically seen as just opportunities to give real teachers a break.
Right. Before
they get back to what's tested on standardized tests, which is math and English. Mm-hmm. And so the danger of that is, like, I have a daughter that's all about the arts.
Yeah.
And all about creation. And because of that, school is absolutely painful for her. Because she's forced almost like 90% of the time to do stuff that she has no interest in.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if you look at what employers are looking for, one of the things that they stress all the time is we want people that can work in teams.
Right.
Right. And arts require that. Think about the teamwork that's involved in making a movie. Right. You have
so many
hundreds. Yeah. Hundreds of people have to all work together, know their role, accept their role, and execute it flawlessly for this thing to work. And all the pieces have to work. It's ultimate teamwork.
Right.
But we don't value, and a dean at NYU at one of their graduations said what we need to focus on is not STEM but STEAM.
Yeah, we've added the arts in time.
Yeah. And that's not for fluff. That's not just to make art people feel good. That's because arts teaches you all this stuff. And one of the greatest things that I feel like I'm rambling, but one of the greatest things that arts teaches you is that art teaches you how to maximize whatever little amount of resources you have.
Mm-hmm.
Because take me as a photographer, and I don't know if people understand what real photographers are actually doing, that we have limitations that are set by what our cameras can do and also what our minds can do.
Right.
So if you have, there's this thing in a camera we call it the exposure triangle. There's three settings that photographers are always manipulating. It's shutter speed. So that's how fast the shutters
The
open
shutter and you can click moments. Yeah.
Right. It's aperture, which is how wide the camera lens is going to open. So that determines how much light the camera's going to let in at one time.
Okay.
And the other thing is this thing called ISO. And that's kind of the gain. That's how it kind of makes an image darker or lighter.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, all three of those things work against each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is running super fast, I want to use a high shutter speed so I can catch their movement. But when you use a high shutter speed, it makes the image super dark.
Yeah, because it doesn't let light in.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to open the aperture to let more light in. So you have to open the aperture to let more light in. But when you do that, it decreases the depth of field that the camera can capture. So the camera can only capture your eye. It might capture your eye, but your hair right here will be out of focus.
Right.
And so, all right, so you have to turn up. So you make the aperture smaller so you can have more stuff in focus, but now you're dark again. So now you have to raise the ISO, which will brighten your picture, but it's also going to make your picture look fuzzier.
Right.
So there's all these things you have to manipulate, but you're trying to do the best you can within the restraints of the resources you have. And that's what artists are doing all the time. A graffiti artist, all right, I have a concrete and I have spray cans.
Mm-hmm.
How can I use this finite amount of resources to make something amazing?
Right.
All of hip hop, all right, it's the 1970s. New York City cuts music out of its budget. So we don't get to do instrumental music anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay, we still want to do music. What do we have access to? Oh, we have access to records. So we'll get 2 record players. Even before there was turntables, we'll get 2 record players, and we'll manipulate the records and take certain sounds from certain records and loop it over and over again. Right, we have a finite amount of resources. What's the maximum creativity we can get from this finite amount of resources? And that's something every employer needs out of their employees. Yes. How can I maximize the usage of whatever finite amount of resources we have? Yeah. And artists do that. That's the space they live in constantly.
Right. And so that transferable, I feel like this speaks to a lot of things like transferable skill sets that are developed when you engage yourself in that. And like you said, making sure that as you are growing and stuff, like involving yourself in other aspects that challenge you to use that limited knowledge and resource. Like you said, you're going to give more time, hopefully, to learn your craft and things like that. But growth doesn't come out of just observation. It comes out of actually being part of the process and finagling and learning. So as we kind of wrap up today, could you give, as a teacher, an artist, a journalist, a visionary, a leader, like all of these things, and I love the hermit crab. I might have to steal that. I love that example for the hermit crabs out in the world who are starting to feel uncomfortable in the shell that they're in because they feel like they're outgrowing it, and they're really thinking about how they're going to step out and take that leap of faith, essentially, between the next area where they have room to grow. What would be your word of wisdom of how to embrace that opportunity, but also do it in a way that doesn't leave you vulnerable to things that could potentially, be obviously, hopefully we're not as fragile as the hermit crab and we can be resilient in the things that, challenge us and scare us, but just how, like, what are some things from your experiences do you think can really help you move from that to that next level?
Sure. First thing, I'm pretty sure I stole that hermit crab thing off the internet somewhere. So,
Okay, cool. So we'll just credit
yeah,
someone brilliant then.
yeah. But what I'll say is this: is two things. One, you have to move past your fear, and don't let other people superimpose their fear of failure on you. Randall Pinkett, Rutgers graduate, Black Rhodes Scholar, first Black person to win on The Apprentice.
Okay.
Right. I remember he was the guest speaker at a luncheon for one of my students that was getting a scholarship. And he had this great quote. He said, "Children believe they can do anything until adults tell them they can't." Right? When you're young, you say, "I'm going to be a policeman and a fireman and an astronaut and an artist
all at the same
and a
time.
rock star." Yep. And then what happens? Some adult says, "Well, you can't do all that. You're going to have to choose something."
Okay.
No, not necessarily true. I always tell people, you can do anything you want as long as you have enough effort and enough time. I'm 47 years old. It's too late for me to become an NBA point guard. It's the time.
That vision is deferred.
Yeah, that there's no time left to do that, right? But as young people, when people say you can do anything you want, you really can, as long as you have enough effort and as long as you have enough time. And you don't. When someone says, you say, "I want to be a singer," someone says, that sounds risky. That's that person saying, "That's risky for me. I don't think I'm good enough to make it as a star. So you aren't good enough. You aren't good enough to make it."
Right.
Don't let other people's fear of failure infect you. Maybe that person isn't good enough. That doesn't mean that you're not.
Yes, you're not. Right. 100%. Love it.
And on top of that fear, someone else said it, but everything good on life is on the other side of fear. All the great stuff requires you to step out in faith and believe that this thing that looks insurmountable, impossible, super hard, that I might fail at in front of everyone, can actually happen. Right? That's everything. That's that same fear you have to conquer when you propose to someone. That person can say no.
They can say no.
Yeah. When you apply to college, right? You have to face this rejection. Nope. You might not be able to get in. Whether it's a job interview, whether it's a promotion or something, anything you don't feel you're ready for. I'm not sure if I'm ready to have kids or not. Right? Most people that have done great things, you never feel ready. You never feel completely 100%. I got to get out of this shell and just go for it.
Sometimes you just got to do it.
Yeah, you'll never feel 100%. This is it.
Right.
You just have to look at it and say, "This seems mostly right. I got to dive in. I have to dive into this thing," and then you have to do it. The other thing is that you have to live your passion. As an adult, you're going to spend most of your time, the best part of every day, the optimal hours, you're going to be stuck at work. And if you hate your job, you're going to hate your life. It's that simple. And I always tell people, I tell my young students, my goal for you is to never have to work. And work is doing something when you'd rather be doing something else.
When you'd rather be doing something else, right?
Yeah.
I like
and you
that.
have to find that thing that you love and do it.
Right.
And that's the only way you're ever going to be happy. And Zora Neale, and for my artists, Zora Neale Hurston has this great quote that I'm going to butcher, but it's something like, "There's no pain as unbearable as the pain of an untold story within you." That you have something to say, you have something to share, and you never get out of it.
You never get it out of you. Right.
It's torturous, right? That's why I have to take pictures. That's why I have to give lectures in class. That's why I have to write books, because sometimes you have something in you and it's absolutely painful to keep it inside of you.
Right.
Don't torture yourself. Let it out. And look, you don't always have to jump into everything 100% when you're that shell's feeling too small. Don't quit your job with the 401k and the health benefits that your family is all dependent on.
It's not for everybody. Don't.
Yeah, just on a whim.
I like my benefits.
Yeah, you can build slowly. You can build slowly, but there is something to be said for jumping out.
Yeah.
Because 100%. That's going to force you to
sink or swim,
to go get it. Right. That's right. Some people will never move to the next level without being forced to.
Yeah.
And I had a mentor that said to me, he said, well, Joel, I was thinking about switching jobs or doing something. I forgot what it was. But he said, you know, usually the big decisions in life are made for you. Something happens and you're forced to, and you're forced into action.
Yes.
So
I am that person.
When that moment comes, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it.
Yeah.
And jump on to the next thing.
I love it. I love it. These things are supposed to be 30 minutes. I feel like low key, I think you should do a master class. I feel like, you know, I've seen them like advertise of like the stars in their professions, but there is so much to learn from the people we're connected to. And I feel like that's like the center of Powerhouse, is that with connection, we can actually expand our knowledge, our reach, and all of these things. If we just start to ask questions and learn the stories of the people that we're connected to. I met you taking photos for our students in summer program. So, I mean, and it just over the years being able to see you and observe some of the work you've done, and also having friends and colleagues in common, and just seeing in the short span of time that I've known you, just seeing how you have grown in terms of a writer and being out there. It's inspirational. And I think that those who watch this should definitely check out your photography page, and we'll put that in like the information posting this so people can check those things out. If you're at Rutgers or intending to go to Rutgers, look up his class. Please. I am a regretful person. I feel like if you do the master class on that, then I could get like a piece of it. So if you want, we could work on that, right?
All right.
Like,
let's figure that out.
I would love to see it. I would love to see it. The wealth of knowledge that you have is just incredible. You say you butcher quotes. The fact that you even remember who said the quote, I think should be noted. And I just want to thank you so much for your time, your passion. Like, you can feel it. It exudes through the screen for the topics that you love to talk about and behind your work. So I'm not surprised that you've been able to cultivate such robust artistry between your artwork, your photography, and your educational pursuits, and also giving to the community. So I want to thank you for taking the time out. Those who watch, please check out this full video. There's so many great nuggets in here for life. And if you're that hermit crab, go ahead and take the risk and start to, it's the beginning of the year, one better, right? The better is the best time is now, right?
Absolutely.
And embracing those challenges and things that come across our lives that sometimes push us out of our shell. So thank you again. And I hope that you have a great rest of your weekend.
And let me just add that anyone that's interested in any of my projects, either photography or the books,
yes,
it's always available at my website, which is my name, Joel Plummer, at joelplummer.com. All my information is there, JOELPLUMMER.com. And everything I do is that's the clearinghouse for all my stuff.
Yes, buy the books, the photo journals, read the blog. It's amazing. I spent like a good hour and a half just like reading through stuff. So
appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Plummer.
Thank you so much for having me.